Sneinig ben niet hilfmach van mijn oudsen is paarst vlasser na veel snel willen we. Spijner niet was er ook goed zit in de maast van een psyche. Scatter, meestal lachen ram, maar gives a his no aan kastuur. Little experts and enthusiasts clash over the future of how we store energy. You have likely seen the headlines, the thumbnails claiming a revolution, and the cynical comments dismissing every new breakthrough as mere vaporware. All the zarrel so mitspar zir rab me made us niron shissermacht. We are told that sodium is the savior of the electric vehicle, and in the next breath, we are told it is a cheap, sluggish alternative that will never leave the laboratory. The questions are heavy, and the stakes are even higher for a world desperate to decouple from the volatility of lithium prices. Was the sudden interest in sodium just a panicked reaction to the supply chain shocks of 2021 and 2022? Now that lithium prices have stabilized, many believe the incentive to innovate has simply vanished into thin air. They argue that the window of opportunity has closed, and that sodium is destined to be a historical footnote. But what if the noise of the crowd is drowning out a much deeper, more calculated shift in the foundations of energy science? Before we move into the heart of this mystery, I invite you to join our community of deep thinkers by subscribing to the channel and engaging with the ideas we explore today. To understand why so many people are quick to dismiss sodium, we must first look at the traditional scientific argument that has dominated textbooks for decades. On paper, the case against sodium seems like an open and shut matter of basic physics and chemistry. Sodium atoms are significantly larger and heavier than lithium atoms, which immediately suggests a lower energy density for any battery using them. In the microscopic world of an electrode, size is everything, and sodium is the bulky intruder trying to navigate a space designed for the nimble lithium ion. Because these ions are larger, they move more slowly through the electrolyte and struggle to squeeze into the crystalline structures of the battery's anode and cathode. This physical reality led to the widely accepted industry dogma that sodium-ion batteries are fundamentally limited by their own weight and sluggishness. Engineers concluded that while they might be useful for stationary storage, like a giant box sitting in a field, they could never power a high-performance car or a long-haul truck. This logic is incredibly intuitive and easy to digest, which is exactly why it has become the standard rebuttal in every online debate. It feels like an immutable law of nature, a ceiling that no amount of clever marketing can ever hope to break through. We love simple answers, and the size problem provided a perfect reason to stop paying attention to sodium altogether. However, a strange thing happens when you look away from the textbooks and toward the massive industrial complexes of the East. While the internet was busy explaining why sodium was a dead end, the giants of the industry were quietly placing their bets. Manufacturers like CATL and BYD, companies that command the global battery market with an iron grip, are not known for chasing whims or wasting billions on failed chemistry. In late 2023 and throughout 2024, these titans began announcing the integration of sodium-ion cells into actual production vehicles. These are not experimental prototypes or science fair projects, but real passenger cars destined for the driveway of the average consumer. If the scientific consensus was that sodium could not compete for mobility, why are the most successful battery companies in history accelerating their deployment? This massive disconnect suggests that the obvious scientific argument might be missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. These companies are moving forward because they have realized that the primary obstacles were not inherent to the sodium atom itself. Something fundamental has changed in how we perceive the limitations of chemistry, shifting the focus from the material to the architecture. The pivot we are seeing from CATL is a signal that the era of lithium dominance is no longer an unchallenged certainty, regardless of what the current commodity prices might suggest. This brings us to a radical reframing of the problem that many researchers are only now beginning to embrace. For years, we blamed the sodium ion for being too slow, assuming its physical dimensions were the cause of every performance bottleneck. But what if we were blaming the runner for the poor condition of the track? The script is now being flipped. The sluggishness we observed was not an intrinsic property of sodium, but a result of how we were engineering the electrodes. We were trying to force a larger ion into structures designed for a smaller one, and when it didn't work, we blamed the chemistry rather than our own lack of imagination. This marks a profound intellectual turn from pure chemistry dogma toward a more holistic, system-level thinking. If you change the environment in which the ion moves, the physical limitations of that ion begin to dissolve. We have spent the last 30 years optimizing every square nanometer of the battery for lithium, giving it a massive head start in the race for efficiency. Sodium was essentially being asked to run a race in boots while lithium was wearing high-performance sneakers. Once we stop attributing every failure to the size of the ion, we can begin to see the battery as a complex piece of architecture that can be redesigned from the ground up. The breakthrough that truly shatters the old consensus comes from a remarkable piece of research published in December 2025. Researchers at the Tokyo University of Science, in a paper featured in Chemical Science, introduced what they called the diluted electrode method. Their insight was elegantly simple but technically profound. They realized that the traffic jams sodium ions faced were caused by overcrowding within the hard carbon anode. Instead of packing the active carbon particles as tightly as possible to maximize density, they did the opposite. They spaced the particles out within an inert matrix, essentially creating more lanes for the ions to travel. This diluted structure was then flooded with electrolyte, ensuring that every single carbon particle had a direct and clear path for ion exchange. To ensure the battery didn't lose its electrical conductivity, they wove a network of carbon nanotubes throughout the structure, acting like a high-speed nervous system. This approach ignored the traditional urge to cram as much material as possible into the cell, focusing instead on the fluid dynamics of the ions. It was a move away from the more is better philosophy of the past and toward a philosophy of precision and flow. By rethinking the spatial arrangement of the electrode, they were able to address the very sluggishness that everyone claimed was unavoidable. The results of this Japanese study were nothing short of shocking for those who believed the old textbooks. Once the electrode scale bottlenecks were removed, the researchers discovered that sodium ions could move into hard carbon at speeds comparable to lithium ions entering graphite. The sluggishness of sodium vanished almost instantly when it was given a proper environment in which to operate. This proved that the speed limits of sodium-ion batteries were largely an artifact of poor electrode design, rather than a law of physics. It was as if we had finally cleared the wreckage from a blocked highway, only to find that the cars were capable of incredible speeds all along. The implications of this discovery are clear and devastating to the skeptics of the sodium-ion revolution. If sodium can move as fast as lithium, then the dream of rapid-charging, high-performance sodium batteries is no longer a fantasy. The reputation of sodium as a budget compromise or second-class chemistry is based on data from outdated architectures. We are beginning to see that the performance ceiling we thought existed was actually a floor that we were just beginning to build upon. This research suggests that with the right engineering, sodium could not only match lithium in certain aspects but perhaps even surpass it in the context of high-power delivery. However, even with the speed problem solved, sodium-ion technology still faced a persistent and frustrating Achilles heel. Hard carbon, the preferred material for sodium anodes, is filled with tiny microscopic pores that are essential for storing ions. But these same nanopores are also an invitation for disaster during the very first time the battery is charged. The liquid electrolyte floods these pores, and when the voltage is applied, the solvent molecules begin to break down and decompose. This creates a messy, inefficient layer that traps sodium ions forever, leading to a catastrophic loss of capacity before the battery has even begun its life. In a lithium-ion cell, the graphite anode forms a stable protective layer quite easily, but hard carbon is far more temperamental and difficult to manage. This lack of first-cycle efficiency meant that a significant portion of the expensive sodium ions you put into the battery were wasted immediately. For a manufacturer, this is a nightmare, as it means you have to build a much larger and heavier battery just to get the usable capacity you actually need. It was another reason why critics argued that sodium would never be economically or physically viable for the demanding world of electric transportation. The battery was essentially sabotaging itself before it could even leave the factory. This is where the precision of German engineering enters the narrative to solve the interface problem. A second major study from the Federal Institute for Materials Research and Testing in Germany approached the hard carbon problem with a brilliant tactical fix. They realized that if they couldn't stop the electrolyte from reacting with the carbon, they could perhaps filter the electrolyte before it reached the pores. They applied a microscopically thin coating of activated carbon over the hard carbon particles, creating a sophisticated molecular sieve. This layer was designed with such precision that it allowed the small, individual sodium ions to pass through freely while physically blocking the much larger and bulkier solvent molecules. By preventing the solvent from entering the nanopores, They stopped the breakdown process that was stealing the battery's capacity. This simple but ingenious molecular gatekeeper preserved the integrity of the anode and dramatically improved the first cycle efficiency. The usable capacity of the cell skyrocketed because the sodium ions were no longer being trapped in a graveyard of decomposed chemicals. This wasn't about changing the chemistry of the battery. It was about protecting the chemistry that was already there. It was an engineering solution to a chemical problem, proving once again that the structure of the system is just as important as the materials themselves. With both the speed bottleneck and the efficiency problem addressed by these two separate breakthroughs, sodium-ion batteries are finally beginning to behave the way physics always suggested they could. We are witnessing the transition from a period of alchemy, where researchers hoped for a miracle material, to an era of pure engineering. The chemistry didn't need a magical new element to work. It just needed us to stop getting in its own way. Performance is now aligning with theoretical expectations, and the gap between lithium and sodium is closing faster than anyone predicted. Sodium-ion is no longer just a cheaper alternative. It is becoming a serious high-performance contender in its own right. This shift in perspective is what makes the current moment so fascinating for anyone following the energy transition. We are seeing a convergence of Japanese innovation in spatial design and German expertise in interfacial engineering. When you combine these two pillars, the resulting technology is something that can survive and thrive in the real world. The narrative that sodium is only for low-end applications is being dismantled piece by these very real, very tangible improvements. We are moving toward a future where the choice of battery chemistry will depend more on the specific needs of the vehicle, rather than a desperate struggle for any available material. It is also important to ground these scientific triumphs in the harsh realities of the global market. Sodium-ion batteries possess several inherent advantages that no amount of lithium optimization can ever fully replicate. They are naturally much better at operating in freezing temperatures, a notorious weakness for lithium-ion cars that lose significant range in the winter. Furthermore, sodium-ion cells are inherently safer, with a much lower risk of the thermal runaway that leads to the dramatic vehicle fires we see in the news. And perhaps most importantly, sodium is available everywhere, ending the geopolitical headache of relying on a handful of countries for lithium supply. While everyone is looking toward the distant horizon for solid-state batteries, sodium-ion is a technology that is here right now. It is being manufactured, it is being shipped, and it is being bolted into the chassis of cars as we speak. While solid-state remains a beautiful promise trapped in high-end laboratories, sodium is the practical, scalable solution for the masses. It is the good enough technology that, through the power of engineering, is rapidly becoming great. The market reality is that we don't need a miracle to save the planet. We need a solution that we can build by the millions today. The story of the sodium-ion battery is ultimately a story about the limits of our own perception. We often dismiss technologies as being materially limited because it is an easy way to explain why progress is slow. We look at the periodic table and think we have already solved the puzzle of what is possible and what is not. But as the philosopher Edward de Bono often suggested, progress frequently comes not from finding new elements, but from rethinking how we use the ones we already have. The limitations of sodium were not found in the atom, but in the stale, unimaginative ways we were trying to package it. This is a powerful lesson that extends far beyond the world of battery chemistry and into our own lives. How many times have you stopped pursuing a goal because you felt you lacked the natural talent or the right materials to succeed? We often build mental walls based on what we think are immutable laws of our own nature, much like the scientists who thought sodium was too big to be fast. But more often than not, the constraint is not our chemistry, but our engineering, the way we structure our time, our habits, and our environments. If you change the architecture of your life, you might find that you are capable of moving much faster than you ever imagined. I hope this exploration of the hidden potential of sodium has given you a new perspective on the technology of tomorrow. As we navigate a world that is changing faster than ever, it is crucial to stay curious and remain skeptical of the common sense that often holds us back. Before you go, if you found this journey valuable, please consider subscribing and sharing your thoughts in the comments. What other technologies do you think are being unfairly dismissed by the experts of today? Let us continue this conversation, and I will see you in the next exploration.